For public input. Thank you very much to our presenters. And we have one accepted request, Lisa Prager. And could I ask Ms Prager to come to the front table, please? Again, this is a 5-minute presentation.
Before I officially begin, I'd just like to thank the good people of Howick for bringing to this council their concerns. They echo the concerns of all of our communities in Auckland in relation to the unitary plan, the failures, the omissions, the lies, the cheating, and the internal corruption that is well alight.
Just before you begin, please, Ms Prager, this is an important opportunity for you and for any other citizen of Auckland to have a say, but when you make comments that are of that nature, they are defamatory. And there is no...
To whom, Mr Mayor?
I'm sorry, I'll ask you please not to interrupt when I'm speaking, and I'll accord you the same courtesy. When you make those comments, there is no qualified privilege here against defamation proceedings. So I just ask you to make your points clearly and strongly as you like, but keep within the bounds of what is within legally accepted limits. And wild allegations don't help in that regard. Can I please now ask you to continue with your presentation?
Before I begin, first of all, I'd like to draw this council's attention to the legal findings of the corruption case within Auckland Transport. However, before I begin, I want to say thank you for giving me the right to speak. It only took me 3.5 months, and the threat of taking it to the point of arrest and engaging with the district commander to get this council to give me, a citizen of Auckland, the right to speak. There is something very, very wrong within the Auckland Council and their fear of the truth and their fear of the public. Now, I have been coming to this council for the last 17 years and brought up many, many issues which have been followed up and found to be true. But today, of the many issues I could deal with, I'm going to simply address congestion, collusion and corruption. And I have no fear of defamation, because when I speak the truth from fact and from within my opinion. Let us be clear. I have before me a document from a person who attended the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants business breakfast at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Club on October the 20th, where the keynote speaker was Stephen Town. Stephen spoke about Auckland's traffic congestion and the council's response, which included outer transport hubs feeding into inner hubs, in brackets buses, more T2 and bus lanes on more arterial roads, and more bike lanes. That seems pretty normal, pretty reasonable. Wouldn't you expect that at a chartered accountants meeting at which there was suppliers to the building industry, developers, a range of people, accountants and lawyers? A question from the floor responding to the above questioned the effects of the above in creating further congestion, increasing travel times for those poor people who use cars, and Stephen's response was, get used to it, as it is the council's intention to reduce lanes for cars, maximising congestion to force people into using buses. Is that correct, Stephen?
Can I just ask you to proceed with your presentation?
I have this on
not in order
affidavit.
to ask questions.
I want to be very clear.
Officials.
I want to be very clear. In speaking to the movers and shakers of Auckland, Mr Town made it very clear that this council has an undisclosed policy and intention of creating congestion. Let's just look at it. Auckland Transport has $220 million given to them by New Zealand Transport Authority that they must spend. Could this explain the explosion of bike lanes? Could this explain the greenwash that somehow all of our traffic woes in this country are going to be saved by cycle lanes? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a cyclist from way back. As an Epsom Girl Grammar School grad, I rode my bicycle every day. And no, we did not have the congestion issues. But I want to know, how do I take my 83-year-old grandma, I beg your pardon, my mother, to the doctors? Do I pop her in the basket on the back of my bike? When my Labrador gets sick, how do I take her to the vets to be euthanised? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-cyclist. But if you bothered to come to Garnet Station, my cafe, and watch the traffic in Garnet Road, you will find a road that is flowing, that is moving. By its width, it is instinctively and naturally safe. And yet this organisation, via Auckland Transport, wants to ram through a cycleway, put in buffer zones, create congestion. And this is what got me thinking. What is this really about? Why would you take a city with an expanding population of cars, no restriction on cars coming into this country? In fact, I believe the number is 826 per day, but don't quote me because I might be wrong on that fact.
You are wrong.
The bottom line here is this organisation, via Auckland Transport, and with the intention of the CEO...
Excuse me, that's a 1 minute bell.
I don't believe I've actually had my 5 minutes.
No, if you just pause, listen for a second what I'm telling you. We give people a 1 minute bell that lets them know they have 1 minute to wrap up their submission. That's a courtesy to you.
Yes, actually I remember John Banks used to do the same thing.
Well, maybe that's because it's understanding orders.
Well, maybe if you understood standing orders, I wouldn't have to have waited 3.5 months to have the right to stand here and speak, Mr. Goff. The bottom line here I want to draw is that this council is bound by a raft of laws, one of them being the Public Records Act, of which none of you, I'm sure, actually have read or understand, because the truth is the executive of this organisation is the only person you hire and fire, and he is the person singularly behind the creation and congestion and support of the collaborative model. Do you know what the collaborative model is? The collaborative model was exposed by the judge in this document, of which 2 Auckland Transport employees, or 1, and a contractor, had gone down for 5.5 years. This is the tip of the iceberg. I want to know where the Audit and Risk Committee's position is in doing an internal investigation, because 30 witnesses were called in this. There are 30 people who knew that thread, and there are hundreds of thousands of threads of corruption going on in this council. How am I going to prove it? Well, I might have to start digging, but the reality is the responsibility exists within this organisation and with you, Mr. Goff, you specifically, in understanding your responsibilities. Now, these poor people have all come here today to complain about an issue in the unitary plan, and throughout the unitary plan are these issues and congestion.
Could I ask you, please, just to wind up your comments now, please?
Yep, I will. The bottom line here is that over 120 years of existence, this council has built up a culture where corruption and collusion, as outlined in this document, are a natural course of justice. Well, I'm here to tell you that those days have ended, and we will come after you in every shape and form. And if you think you're safe, I want to tell you that this organisation has more leaky holes, more dissatisfied employees, more oppressed people who've had to sign confidentiality agreements that they keep their mouths shut from every single service. But trust me, there are plenty of people ready and willing to speak out. And it's time, Mr. Goff, that
It is time, Ms. Prager.
It is time, Mr. Goff, that you took responsibility, because you promised the people of Auckland, when you stood for mayor, that you would uncover these things.
You have exceeded your time, and I've given you some grace for that. I now want to ask councillors who may have a question of Ms. Prager. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's probably safe to say that Lisa Prager and I don't share too many similar views on matters, but Lisa, are you aware that the stage 2 of the Amity project, which is from Pakuranga to the Panmure bus station or train station, is eliminating lanes for private motor vehicles? And despite questions from myself, the MP Maurice Williamson, to show us how this will reduce congestion, they've not been able to show that. In fact, they've now acknowledged that it will actually not reduce congestion, may actually increase congestion. Are you aware of that?
It's interesting. it's impossible, obviously, for me to be aware of all of these actual facts, but it is very clear to me as I look around Auckland that the creation of congestion is part of pushing the intensification model and justification. And I am very concerned that all of these actual actions are designed to transfer the public wealth into private hands via this sham. And it's extremely hard to believe, because you go, why would our city fathers do this to us? Well, you have to actually understand that they are no longer our city fathers, that they have turned our public structure into a private corporate establishment, and we are the cash cow funding it, and I'm most unhappy. I appreciate you bringing this point to the council, and it's pretty clear, you know. I can only keep my head around the Western Bay's issues, and that's keeping me really busy.
Next question, Councillor Casey.
Lisa mentioned, there's no doubt that everybody around this room has been watching that case with just incredible amount of sadness, really, but Lisa asked whether there's any follow-up internally via the Audit and Risk Committee, and I think that's my question really too. What are we doing?
That's directed at me rather than Lisa. Yes, I gave notice immediately at the time that those convictions were entered into, that Audit and Risk would be looking at the processes and procedures of all of our CCOs to determine their adequacy. I wrote to the CCOs requesting the same thing. They acknowledged that request and gave that assurance. Audit and Risk, of course, is now chaired by an independent person outside of council. Half of the membership will be people outside of that council. Many of them have backgrounds in the role of the Auditor General's office, and we, of course, take that incredibly seriously. This country has a great reputation for being free of corruption, but free of corruption is an exaggeration. Of course, corruption can happen anywhere, and when it happens, it tarnishes the reputation of a lot of other good people working in those organisations. We have zero tolerance for that, and I expect Audit and Risk to be following up, absolutely. So thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's probably just a follow-on question from Councillor Kathy Casey's there, and thank you for your reply, Mr Mayor. Obviously, I'm the Deputy Mayor on that Audit and Risk Committee. Deputy
Chair.
Sorry, Bill.
So new and so ambitious.
Good news article.
I'll reword. Yeah, thank you.
Freudian slip.
Yeah, Freudian slip, sorry. So, Lisa,
Ambitious.
just...
Please continue, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in terms of, you heard the Mayor's reply to that, and that it's absolutely correct. He has issued those statements to the Audit and Risk Committee and the CCOs. So my question's just trying to get more of an understanding around the nature of the resolution that you're expecting from that Audit and Risk Committee. You alluded to it briefly, but I couldn't quite gather the full nature of your expectation there.
Yep. My expectation is that every single strand of this organisation is audited, but more specifically that the Public Record Act is engaged, and that every single contract to every single contractor going back the last 10 years, current and future, is made publicly available for under 50,000 and over, that there is no opportunity for commercial sensitivity, that no longer are these deals done behind closed doors, that this council has the courage to go, if we're going to contract someone to do a road, that information is published. In fact, any time any contracting is done outside, it is made publicly available, and this concept that confidentiality within the council is eradicated because you are administering public money, not private money. And commercial sensitivity is really reserved for those lucky people like myself in private enterprise. If you don't want to open your books, don't be in local government and don't be in government. You are the guardians of our assets and the revenue. And I want to be very clear here. This council went to the government looking for $400 million to solve transport issues, and $220 million of it is going to be spent on cycleways. Surely Surely that's not the best use of our ratepayers' money. Greg, I hope that answers the fact that we want to see a broad, wide and public exposure of contracts, contractees, their relationships, the companies they work for, the key people in council who respond to them, the people who actually select them, and the tender process.
Councillor Fletcher, please. Last question.
Thank you.
Second to last question.
Lisa, my question in regard